Hello, can you hear me? Looking for one yes, and then I will carry on. Good. Hello, Barton. Hello, Stephen, and hello, Lee. So you can see we're a bit bare bones at the minute. We are down. Not only are we down the Toad, who has paintball on this weekend, we're also down Welshie, who's unable to make it tonight. We're also anticipating James coming on, who I'm not 100% sure where he is at the moment. So you're stuck with me, which is probably the best out of the four anyway, I would say, and I'm sure you would all agree in the comments there. He is imminently about to arrive, which means there'll be the usual jiggery-pokery on making sure you can hear him, and also then moving everything slightly, because I think with two people it'll mean slightly more of an issue in terms of the placement of the cameras. Anyway, this is very much going to be one for you guys to get involved in, because there's plenty of time for that, and we're also touching on some topics which are, it's not controversial this time, it's more about it's opinion pieces, so I think you'll probably agree with some of the things that we've got lined up, and also just a chance for you guys to share your opinion on some of the legions in particular that I don't have much experience with. Yeah, something like that. I'm not sure I'd ever say that Heresy is orgasmic, but maybe some of my opponents might say that after I throw away a 4-point lead and they win it in the last time. So one of the first things that we're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about, seeing as I am solo at the minute, is that it's about the different game types again. We've kind of touched on this, and I think that is something which will become more prevalent as more people are experimenting with events and more people are experimenting with sort of opportunities to go out and try different things. Experiment might be more, Stephen, that might be more in line with what you're saying. So I would say most people play something in the region of 3,000 points outdoors, box standard, 30k. I would think that's probably about 90% of the games I've played, if not more. And I own a Zone Mortalis board that's hidden under here. I've just not really dug it out and played many games with it. I think that Zone Mortalis in particular offers something different, and I know that from the other guys there that are running events that that's something that they want to explore. And I think Zone Mortalis offers a different strategy to the game. I think the sort of close confines, smaller army is definitely something which many gamers really enjoy. And I'm looking at the comments here, waiting for people to jump in or out and say, no, I hate this, or I love this. No one seems to be disagreeing with me there. I think it offers something different when you're forced to try and leave some of your stuff behind, which is probably why it's at a smaller points level, purely because most people don't own 3,000 points of purely infantry unless they're truly dedicated to the Centurion mindset. I think that the Zone Mortalis thing we've probably touched on enough. I think there's plenty of discussion points on there. What I'm really looking for is to discuss some of the older 40k rule sets, but also some of the modes that are inside the black books, which offer just a different take. And I don't think we as a community have done enough to look at those. I think people probably flick to those pages and then think they're too complicated, but equally I think they're probably looking at it and kind of just glossing over them, because it is big. There's big terminology at play. There's big things there that aren't quite what we're used to, and the majority of people, I feel, don't really play linked games. And tell me if I'm wrong. There's a few of you there that can tell me I'm talking rubbish if you think so. I think that the opportunities that linked games offer are often overlooked in communities. And for example, the guys down in Carlisle were playing a big game. I think that was a one-off. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lee. I think that was a one-off game, but you had added quite a lot of rules and elements to it that were different to the bog standard game to try and encourage a better experience for the people playing. but it'd be interesting to see if you guys in your communities have done any linked games using the black books or using your own. I think it adds something that we're almost doing a disservice to the concept of the Heresy not to. And I think that's where people enjoy the Heresy.Scot events, where there's something to play for. It's not just a one game, shake hands and walk away. I think when you add in that narrative, it's a narrative game, adding a narrative element to it, I think you can Prospero Game Day. Yeah, I think that sort of thing where you can run the black book as it is and just pick one. Pick Prospero is a good example, Stephen, and you could just say, well, I'm going to we're going to play Prospero, but it won't be on Prospero. It'll be on, I don't know, Jones' planet, and it's not going to be Space Wolves and Thousand Suns. It's going to be the Loyalists will be the Thousand Sun equivalent, and the Traitors will be the Space Wolf equivalent, and just using what's there, because that legendary mission where someone possesses a Titan and it gives you the advice on, if it's this level, play a Warhound. If it's this level, play a Warlord. That it's too good to just sit in a black book and not be used. Some of these missions are far too enjoyable, like Firetide in the first black book. Me and Richard played that mission. We must have played it about 4 or 5 times, and then it just dropped off. We just stopped doing it. But it's probably one of the most incredibly insane missions that they have. I think that's a brilliant way of encouraging people to try and think about playing the game slightly different. Brilliant way of trying to encourage people to try and use a different mindset almost. I don't know if mindset's the right thing, but also trying to just not play the 6 that everyone has. I think that's probably one of the most sort of frustrating things about it is you've played kill points in 40k 3 million times. I think that's probably the most sort of overplayed mission in the history of wargaming, because I just don't think that's a very. It's just not. I don't even know what the term I'm looking for. Just it's boring. I think playing kill points all the time is boring. I think it doesn't help people play a very deep game, because it encourages you to sit at the back of the board and shoot each other. And there's certain legions, Space Wolves in particular, who probably don't really play very well at shooting at the back of the board. And I think that's something that I personally struggle with as a game. Even with my World Eaters, when I can charge across the board and I can do that, I just find that it's not fun. But maybe I'm wrong, and that's me, Mr. Controversial there. Yeah, I think, Stephen, you're right there. I think it is a standard hang-up from competitive gaming. I think it's easier as well. Like, how many people have objective markers in their back pocket? They bring their dice, they bring their templates, they bring their rule books and their tape measures. It's just something that you probably don't think about, and it's probably something where if you don't have a good one, if you don't have a good set of objective markers, it can, like using dice, you pick them up and you play with them, and then halfway through the game you go, oh, that's not there anymore. So I think that's something that we as a, oh, here we go. This looks like maybe James is joining us. Give him 2 seconds. He's stolen my nameplate, which I don't think I can do anything about. Try and steal it back. Hey there, James. No. Oh, there we go. So we need to find a way of moving me over, but whatever. You can do without my ugly mug, I suppose. You're frozen, James. I don't know if you've not said anything, so I don't know if anyone else can hear you. Good. Come on, you got to at least chip in and say that so that people can hear you. No, something's on your end, James. I think everyone can see you on the stream, so you might have a microphone issue. Yeah, it goes without saying that this is the sort of Heresy.Scot experience. And you should be able to hear James. I don't think there's. I'm not sure it's my side. Everything else is plugged in, played. There shouldn't be anything that I'm certainly not muted you. Hope. Well, I'll carry on, and we'll just have to hope. Yeah, exactly. Get the tech priest. So yeah. So I think that. Oh, Stephen. Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you sighing, James. I'm sure that people can hear that. Did anyone hear his big almighty sigh, or is it just coming through my headset? Nope. So it could be on this. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be anything wrong. I've not touched anything on this. So hopefully, if maybe James has plugged his microphone into the wrong socket, you guys can hear me. So I've not touched anything. Seems to be I'm like Alan Grant in Jurassic Park, where I can't touch anything without it breaking, but I've not touched anything this time. Yeah, and objective markers, Stephen, never say never. It's not something I would rule out. 3D printers are doing quite well. I'm sure you guys saw my pistol, which came out not too bad. Black does not look very good on a webcam thing. That came out pretty cool. Just mucking about to test what the capabilities were. So hopefully we're not going to have James just sitting there staring intensely into the camera, but it adds something to the show, so we can always laugh about it later. So anyway, yeah, so I think looking through the Black Book, not just in the missions, which are very, very good to try to steal one or two and play them, I think having the opportunity to, I don't think I turned down, that's a good suggestion. I can hear him typing, he's clicking away, so he can't hear me, so it's not me that is the... I can hear you clicking, James, if you can hear me. I'll even tell him on a message. I'm pretty sure I've not touched anything. I deliberately don't touch anything anymore, so that you guys don't end up with me causing all manner of issues. I'm convinced it'll be on. See, I can. Yeah. If you say hello, if James you can hear me, you can just say hello, and I'm sure everyone would hear you. Well, free sponsorship. So hopefully, while James resolves that, I'll just say my bit about the Black Book missions and can work the Black Book campaigns, and we can work through some of those. The first one would be, and it's I just went through them all today and had a nosy at the sort of which ones were that I've touched upon, or I've played a little bit, or I've tried a little bit, and which ones I like. I don't know if you guys want to sort of jump in and tell me them in advance, but the Victory's Vengeance from Book 3, and that one is really a nice way to get people into the hobby. I think that is, it kind of hits home that heresy struggle where you're in a planet in the middle of nowhere, there's no more reinforcements, and what you have at your disposal is the only thing that you're going to get. And I think that if you were trying to convince people to try heresy, it would be quite a useful way of sort of just luring them in before you make them spend lots and lots of money. It's he's disappeared. The Victory's Vengeance campaign is kind of set up in a way that is pools of resources that you either, and it kind of tracks your army where if you have ample resources, then you are you're fine. Nothing really changes, and I think you get to reroll runs actually, which is quite an interesting. I don't know why having extra rations makes you run faster. Then there's as it degrades, you start to get things like you roll 3 dice and take the lowest for. You must have heard that. No, he's not come back. So it kind of tracks as you run out of resources. You can you roll 3 dice for difficult terrain. Take the lowest. You roll when you really run out, you can no longer run. And I think that sort of desperation is quite cool in a way. I think when you can get to the point where it's too much bookkeeping, and I think that starts to become a problem for when you're trying to play a game. If you're reaching for the book 300 times, it's probably not, you're not really playing the game anymore. But you have to do a little bit of that to have a good campaign, in my opinion, because I think that the only way to add the sort of risk is to take some additional rule sets, additional risks, additional, like if you take a character can die, that sort of thing. I think that is where you get the best out of a campaign. But I don't know if any of you guys have played Victory's Vengeance. It'd be interesting to hear how you get on with it, or if it's something that you've been thinking about trying, or whether it's something that you would maybe want to see at an event where everyone brings a smaller amount of models, but each faction has those resources. I think the risk of doing it at an event is the inherently are imbalanced. Like if I was playing with James or playing with Richard, I kind of roughly know what they've got, and I would take what I would consider to be quite a fun game. I think if you do that randomly, where you don't know what the other side's going to bring, you could end up in a situation where by the end of day one, it's pretty much a foregone conclusion as one side has no resources and one side has them all. I think that would be quite interesting to hear what you think about that. James, can you hear us yet? This is the greatest heresy show on earth. You heard it here first. So if he can't even see us, then it's definitely not my end. So I will tell him so. But yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what you guys think in the comments about the sort of how much is too much. I think that's something that will come through as I'm flicking through the things that I want to talk about. I can hear you laughing, James, so surely we can hear you. You're going to have to, unless I'm going crazy, you're going to have to tell me if you can hear James laughing or not. James is still silent. That's like the sort of like, I'm going to have to try and get like, oh. Right, so what you've said there will take the guys a few seconds to get through. They should hopefully be able to hear that. I'm trusting Barton to tell us the truth. Barton's not saying anything. Barton is the one that's been. He's already said something, Barton, so if you've missed it, then it's clearly not. I'll tell him to say a long sentence. This could be amazing if you're trolling me, Barton, or James. Anyway, I'll carry on. He thinks he knows what it is, so I'm going to have to, unless that is, I'll ask him specifically, is it me or you, and then I'll carry on, because the answer to that decides whether I have to do something or not. So book 3, as Stephen says, I think the narrative. I don't know if I would say it's about the narrative is an important bit. The linking of the stories is obviously vital, but the ability to use the rules as presented, I think, is different. I think it's very easy in a narrative for me to say, if the traitors won, then the loyalists now have inferior equipment, therefore their weapons ranges are reduced by 6 inches. Like, that's a rule off the top of my head, no effort at all. That's actually, hold on. It's definitely James. It's definitely James. He has muted himself, or he's done something. He's trying to listen on Twitch, which has about a 10-second delay. So I'm 10 seconds ahead of you guys. I can't give you lottery numbers, I won't be quick enough to get you guys to place them, but he is listening as he goes. I think we're nearly cracked it. Anyway, it didn't burn the right incense. This is it's going swimmingly. So, for the next one though, this is the one that I think, and I'm going to be very biased. I know James would agree if he gets caught up and he would like to discuss this. I'll try and linger it so he gets the chance to come in. The most successful local campaign that we've ran was for the Book 4 one, which was Conquest, and I think the rule set's even called Conquest. It has a campaign mode which is incredibly detailed. It's about 40 pages or something like that. It goes over so many different topics. It includes a reprint of the city fight rules, which is something which I think was on my list here. That's why I'm pointing, as if that really helps you. It's City Fight and Planet Strike are two of the finest things that 40k added as it went through its iterations, and it just changes that sort of, like, we need to get a beachhead, so Planet Strike. Then we need to move out of our landing zones into the city, do City Fight. That sort of thing is brilliant. I think that for me is where 40k really started to get into its, for me, the golden era of trying to do stuff. But the Conquest Book 4's campaign section, it just adds so much in terms of the stuff you need to think about. It tells you about how to play a system. So you start on Planet 1, fight over Planet 1, and it branches out, and it gives you all this stuff that sort of covers all of those things. It gives you the best way of having sort of terrain impacts, character progression, which is something which, it's a shame Gary does not appear to be in the audience here, but it's something that we always go back to when we're having sort of better conversations about things that have happened in the hobby. His chaplain, we played in Book 4, Conquest has a character progression thing, and if you do certain acts you get experience, and you spend the experience on progressions. And we all picked Praetors with the exception of Gary, who picked a chaplain, and it ended up my Space Wolf Lord, and I just gave him Lightning Claws because I thought that would be a reasonable thing to do. Ended up killing loads of people. It just went mad. He got so many victory points, ended up winning lots of games, and he was always on the battlefield and killed lots of stuff. And it ended up, by the end of the campaign, he must have had nearly every special rule going. He got, like, he was a specialist in fighting in jungles. Well, I'm not sure Space Wolves are particularly destined to fight in jungles, but I'll take it. And there was actually that sort of fighting over the system was actually quite fun. And I think the rules, when you can add in certain stuff that hold on, James disappeared again. It's gone. So I do recommend them in Barton. I think that's most of them are in softbacks, so they're a bit cheaper. Definitely wouldn't recommend spending £1,000 on them, because you only really need a couple of people in your community to have them. But I think when you can get stuck into a campaign like that, you can kind of lose yourself. You can kind of you just sort of you feel like you're playing that character at that stage, and that's where it becomes more fun for me. And that's probably my peak Heresy time, was when we managed to get sort of half a dozen people locally playing in that campaign with all the bells and whistles and consistently and giving the results properly for a while, where you knew you had your phases that you had to work through. But I think that, again, as I said earlier, is where the campaigns kind of fall apart, where you give everyone a month to play their game and half the people don't. That's where I kind of struggle with a local setting versus a weekend where people give up their time and pay to come and play at a venue. I think that's the sort of toss up between the two there. You can't get quite the same, because you're only playing 5 games and they're in a very 3 on a Saturday. I think that's where it really struggles to feel like, it feels like a close encounter, and it feels like you're playing quite a narrative-y, like, yeah, kill them all, bolt gun them all down. But when you play over a longer period, I think you can have that time to sort of sit back and actually write some notes about what your character did or what happened, which is kind of, I would say that's one of the fair critiques of Heresy.Scot so far, is that we've not quite managed to capture those moments where someone has done something really cool and written it down and put it out as a story at the end of the weekend. But you can totally do that when you play a campaign at home. So I would recommend finding a way of getting those Book 4 campaign pages, if nothing else. And then the last one, I've done a whole section myself, unless James drops back in. The Shadow Wars out of Book 6. That adds quite an interesting few missions. If you haven't looked at that, then that's definitely worth at least lifting one out to try it, because it is very much about reward-specific acts rather than it being those bog standard missions. So there was one mission which stood out to me where every sweeping advance you did got you an extra victory point. Obviously that suits certain armies better than others, and they've all been inherited balance. If you're a gunline Iron Warriors player, you're probably not going to get many sweeping advances, but that sort of trying to force people to think about, oh, well, I'm a gunline, I'm not going to get too close to you because you'll get a victory point there. I think that's quite key in terms of just changing your mindset a wee bit, which is maybe what all this topic that I've just been talking about is for. So we might revisit this depending on whether James returns. He's about to sign back in because I can see his little icon there. I'll just give him a minute. And for you guys, Friday night D&D, there is something in that, but I think the problem, and you'll find that with certain events, will be most people don't want to come on the Friday as well. I think that is fair to say that people probably would prefer to be able to turn up at 9 on the Saturday and play some games, especially locals. It seems the further you go, the further away you travel, the more willing you are to do stuff on the Friday night. At least that's my experience. But I think that could be something that we look at again and see if there's a way of encouraging that sort of more thought to go into the games. But I'm a bit concerned about. I think you can sort of put too much pressure on people, and some people just want to play games. It's 5 games in a weekend. How many people can say they've done that with their pals at home? So some people just purely want to come, and if there's a story, great, but they're quite happy just rolling the dice. Yeah, I think, like saying, when you say Titanic, it's a battlefield Gothic or epic, when that is inevitably redone. I think that makes sense to have that as an experience there. So, yeah, Battle Companies, actually, that is a good shout. I think Battle Companies it's almost, is it Kill Team? Kill Team has got a Heresy rule set somewhere, and that's very similar to Battle Companies. I guess for me, I'm quite biased in that I prefer more models on the table, because I don't think that 30k has a good enough basic rule set. Everyone has one wound, so if you're playing with 6 models and someone has a plasma gun and shoots two of them dead. It's not You're not getting quite the same experience. I know you can play more games and you can play more quicker games, but I think I would want to see almost a redesigned rule set. I don't think Kill Team did that, but I think that would be something I would like to see. And then, yeah, I've already said about the Battle Company, Kill Team from you, Stephen. James thinks he's coming back, but he's run out of time for this section, so we'll let him come back in with any points if he heard any, and we'll play on. But I totally agree that Kill Team is great for the new players. So this is the one that I was hoping to get quite a lot of involvement from you guys. The sort of character, which character best fits their rules or theme, and which era would you like to see a character from? So, sort of inspiration from this would be, you take someone like Rogodorn. So Rogodorn went to Terra, early doors. He probably, in my opinion, doesn't merit a second rule set, or a second model even, because I don't think there was enough. He changed as a person, and he changed in his mind, but in terms of his capabilities on the tabletop, or his capabilities as a fighter, didn't really change at all. So I don't think that he would need to have a second look at him. And I think that would probably say most of the loyalists don't really fall into that bracket. So it's not that I think that a Primarch is sort of bad, because I do think some of them could use some tweaks, but I don't think that like take someone like Leman Russ, because I'm biased, I'm a Space Wolf fan. Leman Russ didn't really change. He changed very badly when he went to the Vengeful Spirit because he got stabbed, but he didn't really change, and he grew as a character, but he didn't really. I can hear you, so I'm hoping that someone in the chat is going to say they can hear you. We're one step closer. Oh, I can see him talking about no audio. That does not make any sense, because there shouldn't really be any issue with the because we have, unless you've changed. I've not changed anything on my side, and if I can hear you, then everyone else should hear you. So just keep talking, James. You're just going to have to say absolute gibberish until I can work out if it is something that I'm doing. If you can't hear me, then it's really bad. I think it must be. It can't be me, because we've done nothing. Check. He's not muted himself because he sent me a picture proof that he's not. No, because he can't hear me at all, so that's what's kind of confusing me a little bit. The only thing I can do is hang up on myself and hope that I can it doesn't cause major issues. If not, then James is just going to be sat there all night looking a little bit forlorn. Right, let's see. If I hang up, you'll get to see some weird stuff. Can't count for what it would be, but we'll do that, and then I'll come back in, guys. So just hold on 2 seconds. Try now, James. I've hung up. Nope, he's having no luck. Okay, so we're just going to have to play on. At least he's there, which is nice to have a bit of company on the screen, so I don't have to look as close zoomed in. But I'm pretty sure it's nothing on my side. I wish Rachel was here, but she's gone out for the night, so no trouble shooting tech support for me. And I can see Discord's fine on the little sound thing I've got here, so sad to say I don't really think it's on my side, but I'll just have to play one and save myself from a stroke or a heart attack. Anyway, I'm looking for input from you guys as well. So, someone like Rogodorn, does he need another character? I don't think so. So, I'm not seeing anyone disagree with me, which is a good thing. I just don't think, and I don't think he deserves. Don't think he needs another model. I don't think that. I think if I had a sway in the studio, I would probably say that Primarchs getting a second pose would be fine. Maybe even an alternative weapon, like my Lunan Russ that was converted for me by Anfarius. I think that sort of giving them a different weapon, one that they enjoyed using, could be interesting. But I don't see the need to really mess with their rules or their profiles, because I don't think many of them really grew or changed, at least on the loyalist side. I think Corax is a brilliant example of one where, hopefully if he's still here, I'm sure he'd be jumped down my throat if I didn't say him. Corax getting the heavy bolter variant, it's not good in my opinion, it's not a brilliant change, but it's an interesting way of sort of threading the narrative. And you collect them as well, Barton, actually, so you should be quite delighted with that. Yeah, and I think that's really, Stephen, that's what I'm kind of getting at. I'm not convinced that many of the loyalist Primarchs really, they certainly wouldn't need a model. I don't think any of them particularly lost their weapon. Like, they might have lost a weapon, or they might have lost a... They didn't lose any limbs, put it that way. So I don't think they really change. Yeah, as Lee puts it, like, I became more evil isn't enough to merit a new rule set. But I guess it's like the rules don't allow it, as the way the game is designed, it doesn't allow it. So Lehman Russ, again, he's someone I know a lot about because that's my legion and I've read all the books and all that stuff. The way he changes is more in a sort of his belief. So he thought that, well, rightly I guess, in the end, he thought he could go take on Horus, kick him in, and then when no one liked that plan, he went and did it anyway. And he sort of, in the process of Wolfsbane, I think it's Wolfsbane, he becomes a lot more, well, a lot less confident, because he has to go and face his demons, and he has to sort of like learn the truth about what the Primarchs actually are. But then he goes, he does what he has to do, and well, becomes unconscious for a while, and Corax bails him out. But it doesn't. There's nothing in the rules that could reflect that. There's nothing. You don't get +1 wound for that. You may get -1 wound, but ultimately, I don't really see what the point is. So there's nothing in the loyalists that, to me, the only one who would merit something would be Sanguinius, maybe, but there's only really a few key conflicts that Sanguinius fought in. So I don't think that it would, if you give 2 profiles and one of them is inherently better for your army composition, you're always going to pick that one, and that's where it starts to struggle a little bit. But in the terms of the traitors, now obviously you've got the traitor Primarchs are going to be, at least 4 of them are giving themselves up to the gods. Interestingly, and this is something that we're going to touch on in a little bit, or I'm going to touch on a little bit, the Siege of Terra books, you get to see a bit more from those demon Primarchs. You get to see how one in particular, there is going to be some spoilers, we won't touch this till after the break, so if you want to tune in for the first bit and then bog off after the break if you don't want there to be any spoilers for the Siege of Terra series, that's perfectly understandable. But some of the way that they opt to walk away or get stuck in or whatever, it's only really the sort of four main gods in Horus that I could see it being worth putting an extra rule set in. Like Horus, obviously, I think Horus, again though, it's the tabletop thing. Horus, with his current iteration of rules, heavy hitting, bit of a tactical genius, orbital bombardment. I almost feel like you could take away some of that tactical genius element, take the bombardment off him, and put something like a debuff. So any unit within 12 inches uses their lowest leadership or is -2 leadership or whatever, because he is the fearsome monster that he's become. Even though he didn't take the field of battle, but you have to ignore that in 30k, because if you don't, you'll never use any of the stuff you've got. So that sort of debuff would add that sort of chaos magic around him. But I don't. Yeah, I guess I don't know if is it just wishful thinking? Well, I mean, the cover of the next Siege of Terra book has Demon Mortarion as he is. So is that model just going to get ported straight across when the time comes? Not sure. So yeah, still no joy from James. He's not making any noise though, so it's hard to tell if he can hear us or hear me, or if he's just desperately clicking on his settings. Low-wise, Corax had the heavy bolter for about 5 minutes, so yeah, I think that is the problem. I think it also can badly influence a model. So if your pose is a guy doing this with a claw and a pistol, and then now he has to have a heavy bolter, it's not really going to work. So I don't want that. I don't want a second rule set that's going to influence my, like, I'm going to have to chop the arms off. I'm going to have to try and find a way of making him in a Hulk Hogan pose as he's sort of waving his finger at the traitors. So I think that's because it takes so much time and effort to design a Primarch. I don't want them to half-ass it. I think I want them to whole-ass it. So I want them to make sure that what they do is the sensible way of dealing with stuff. So when you're putting up Riemann Russ in a pose where he's sprinting forward, well, there's very limited things you can do with that. Angron, he's almost crouching, so there's very little you could do bar just bringing out a big bloodthirster for him. So yeah, I think that's where it's kind of wishful thinking to think that we're going to get Primarchs that do it. However, I'm not just talking about Primarchs, and this is where I need you guys with your in-depth knowledge of your individual legions to chip in, because which characters do you feel best represent their rules or their fluff or their theme? I'm going back a little bit to my previous army that I've only got about 4 models left of the Imperial Fists. I actually think the Imperial Fist characters represent themselves brilliantly. I think Alexis Pollux as a concept, as a model, his rules all work brilliantly. I think his punching one sort of initiative with his power fist is brilliant, and he's got melt a gun. It just sort of looks like a guy that's ready for anything, which he was in the lore. So I think he's quite good. I think Sigismund as well, and I think the Murnival FAQ. I can hear you, James, so hopefully that's what people are about to type in the chat in about 4 seconds' time. I think Sigismund. Can you hear me? That's more important. No, I can hear you. You're shining up, so I'm pretty sure I've not done something wrong. If you can't hear me, then I'm not sure if it's something on your side. I've tried muting all the things that I need to mute, and it doesn't seem to be doing anything. If you guys can stop hearing me at any point and give a shout, then that means I know I'll fix it at the break. So James could probably try and fix it at the break. So he can sit there looking pretty. I think he's trying to get his phone out now. As long as I'm here, then we can carry on. But yeah, just not sure. I don't think it's a Twitch thing, but he's where he needs to be in terms of the settings. So we'll see. Anyway, so Pollux, Sigismund, I think is brilliant. And Murnival guys, I think it was Murnival or Road to Terra, took away his Eternal Warrior. And I don't know, I think it's good, but he kind of merits it. He is essentially one of the few mortals that can go toe to toe with Primarch. And if he doesn't have Eternal Warrior, he can't. So I don't think there's much, unless it was like Eternal Warrior against a Lord of War. I don't really think there's much to lose sleep over with that. I don't really think that the Space Wolves, from my biased point of view, really fit or don't fit the theme. I don't think there's enough there that doesn't really matter either way. Just kind of they're there. They do nice things that like the heavy bolter guy, name has escaped me at the moment. He Varro Redblade. He fits his fine, but doesn't really need to change. Like he's probably too good, if anything. I think people would say that, but I don't think there's anything there that's horrific. And then sort of, I don't think there's any that you see grow through the heresy. Karn, Abaddon. I don't think either them. I'll carry on for now because I just heard him say stuff, but it's obviously not coming through. Yeah, I think like some of the Raven Guard, like when you get through the end of one of their sort of Shattered Legion-esque, I think that's kind of a fitting conclusion, but I'm not convinced it needed. Because Space Marines, when they're in the small tier, it seems to be when you've got 10,000 Space Marines, they're all shite, but when you have 5, they're invincible. And I think that's where Salamander's Raven Guard and Iron Hands, they got a really good deep dive into some of their individual superstars, but you can't kill them off quickly because then what's the point of giving them their moment in the sun? And I think that's where I can't remember his name. I should have written some of these down. The one that goes off on his little jolly with the crew and goes into lunar base in the Siege of Terra ones. I can't remember his name. It'll come to me later. But yeah, I think that's where, while they didn't get to enjoy the Heresy story and probably won't feature in many of the fluff to come, that sort of element of like being able to give them a bit of chance in the books. I don't know. I'd probably rather have better rules, to be honest. I don't think I would rather have a character that's amazing in the lore and then in they don't even get a nice set of rules, or don't get rules at all, as you guys are saying there. I think that's one of the issues there. But it'd be interesting. I've got two Raven Guard people in one space. I don't think that'll ever happen again. But what, in terms of characters that you've used, do you find aren't that effective on the tabletop and who merit better rules? Or, like we're trying to talk about, which ones have really nailed the rules? It'd be really interesting to hear from you guys. Give you a wee chance to type that while I check my notes some more. I forgot about Lorgar actually. Lorgar's a good one. That he got his second version of rules where he's exalted. I think that's really cool. I think that's welcome. I think Lorgar kind of deserved that, where he really heavily invested himself in chaos, and that was what he did. And if you put someone in, like take someone like Valdor. Valdor doesn't really merit a new rule set because up until what happens to the Emperor happens, he doesn't really. He's stoic. He's the leader. I think that's where you'd probably say his rules are fair enough, and that's where you can work through people like that, and you end up saying they don't really, they don't have to change because you're only doing a detriment to them, and that's what I'm kind of saying about if you give 2 rule sets and one of them is crap, then no one's going to pick that one, so it's not going to work. Um, yeah, so I think that's where I'm looking for a character that at the start of the Heresy, like Loken at the start of the Heresy, Loken at the end of the Heresy, give me a rule that, give me a normal captain, give me a fancy guy. That's the perfect example of a character you follow from start to end who changes. And that is where you'd maybe say, again, Space Wolf biased, forgive me, you'd maybe say that Bjorn, who is blatantly what Gregor Fellhand is. I don't care what anyone says. He's blatantly meant to be Gregor Fellhand. The sort of idea he could maybe be a squad sergeant upgrade, or just like a wolf guard, follow his career through to badass by the end of the Heresy. I think that's where sort of having career progression is what I'm hinting at that I want to see with a character. I don't just want it to be, here's Abaddon, he's got a not demon sword that means you can use it in 40k, and he's got his claw, which is just a lightning claw, so you can use it in 40k. That was blatant. Like, that was just to get a new model out that people could convert. I would rather have seen him just having a different take. I think that would have been better, but I'm incredibly biased. So yeah, I think there's certainly elements there of some of the rules that don't quite flow through. I don't know. Was it Quinn was on a jet bike with Terminator armor? Probably. I mean, that's the whole racing round the hold of the ship was cool. I think that's an interesting. That shows why they have their super speed and all that stuff. I think that's where lore kind of explains the rules. Although, I mean, that's been stupid because they were always portrayed as being good at riding stuff, but that's a good example. If someone went, that's bullshit, they shouldn't be able to do that with their jet bikes, you can say, well, actually, in the Scars page, whatever, you're that way inclined. So I think that's pretty cool. Right, let's see. As well, now, me desperately trying to fix this and having a wee break, and also gives me a chance to make sure that James hasn't ran off or doesn't start crying on the stream. So give me 5 minutes. I'll go and have a quick pee. I'll try and be back around about 8, and hopefully we'll actually get to hear from James. So just bear with me, and we'll be back as quick as we can. Okay, we are back, and I can hear James, and he can hear me, and this is your chance to say, I don't know, something controversial, James, and let's see if people will react in the chat to show that they know you're here. Now, if they don't say they can hear you, they've got to be trolling, and we'll just ban them all one by one. There is no way that's silent, Bart. I'm not having that. Surely not. I'm going to wait and see if he's pulling my pisser. Oh, no way. They're saying, yeah, you're sitting so every time you've got to make loads of noise so that I can test out and these guys can tell me when it's coming through, because that's that is the challenge at the minute. I've not changed anything. This is so annoying because I can hear you. You can hear me now. Hold on. There's only one option it can be now. And these guys, you can still hear me, guys. There's no issue with that. So you can still hear me. The Discord little thing I've got set up you should be hearing James. I've turned off all the other ones. There should be no echo. Now talk loads, James. I've just talked for an hour. Make loads of noise so I can try and work out what the hell's going on. Keep going. I definitely can't hear you, which I don't understand because there shouldn't be any issues around the audio capture because this is nothing at all has changed since we've done this. So yeah, we're not getting. The only thing I can try is one more sort of me jump out and jump back in. So let's see what happens. This is incredibly annoying. You're there, you're there. James is coming across as the strong silent type. It's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, you've got to talk, James, otherwise I've got no chance. Even if you're just saying utter gibberish. Call people names, get revenge on people that won't be able to hear you. No, there's like a lag or something going on. Yeah, call people. Yeah, that's right. They are all bastards. Yeah, I don't know. This is technology at its finest without Rachel's help. I'm kind of at a loss here. The only thing I can do. So if I'm going to push a button here, guys, in the chat, and I'll keep talking, and you tell me if you can no longer hear me. So I'm going to keep talking. You should still be able to hear me, James. Yeah, these guys should not be able to hear me anymore. No, so they can still hear. So the Discord is picking up the sound fine. So it's something else. Something else is going on with the sounds there. Oh, it's so annoying. Rachel is my hero for things like this, but I changed nothing between shows when we got it working on 1 and 2 and 3, so there's no reason for that not to work in terms of the desktop audio. And I can see when I'm talking it's not going up, so there's obviously something. Yeah, try on your phone or something, James. I don't know if you can. If I ever get into streaming, that's that's never doing this again. Yeah, I don't know what it is, and I can see it. Like the desktop audio is just not picking anything up, so I can only pick up. I can try that, and it's not. I don't think it's changing anything. I can hear you. I can see you. Unless the guys here start celebrating, then we're still in the same problem. No, so it's still an issue with that, which is just. Ugh. I'm running out of ideas for it, unfortunately. The only thing I can find. Anything changed? Just need lots of noise from you, James, and we'll see if that makes any odds. That's not making any noise. I can't hear you now, so that's a change. Oh, wait, keep going. Yeah, tell. No, doesn't look like it from unless no one heard your annoying noise. Yeah. Right. Well, unfortunately, it's probably not the. Doesn't seem to be anything in terms of the audio mixing that's working. So the real thing, like I can hear you, and we'll do a bit of like passing it back and forth, or you can jump onto Twitch and you can actually like school these guys and your vast knowledge of heresy. It's up to you. I'll just have to plow on. We can always back and forth. It's these guys that can't hear you. Yeah, so I think the only way is going to be if you type into a chat the actual stream, these guys will be able to hear, and they'll just have to deal with me for now, and I'll have to work out what the hell went wrong. But that's by and by. So I'm going to show some of the things that James has shared with us. So he had put forward some of the things that he's seen over the last wee while that he thinks are particularly cool, and I totally agree. So we'll cover him over so we can just pretend that he's not there. So we've got really cool plasma gunner here. I think that sort of when someone does something a bit grittier with the heresy, you can really you can tell that because it stands out so much from everyone else's stuff. I think this Ultramarine really shows that, and a not traditional plasma glow as well is really cool. So it's a funny thing with these, as you can see, Stephen has liked them all, so you're getting a free shout out there, Stephen Boner, Stephen_Boner. So that I quite like that. I agree that I think that plasma gunner kind of hits home how smart that is. Yeah. So what James wanted to tell you was that objective source lighting is exactly the right amount for him, and it looks like it's about to charge up and shoot something flying off. There we go, wood elf. We'll do it. Tim agreeing with you before you even got to hear what you said there, James. So I agree. I think that I've seen there was a model that I saw. I think it was the Night Horner, and it was a beautifully painted model on 3 sides, and then on the 4th side, the person had wanted to do objective source lighting, and it was like basically had painted the entire model the colour of that plasma coil on that side because of the light that was coming off something. And I could see what they were trying to do, and it's real and it's authentic, but it just doesn't work on a static model that you put on the table. So yeah, I agree. I think that is just about the right amount there. You've got to remember these guys typically aren't fighting in the dark as well, so like it's not. If you wanted to paint your guy where they were fighting in pitch blackness and you had the light that was sort of beaming off them, then yeah, I think that's for me would be the right amount fighting outdoors. And then the other guy, obviously a really cool Thunder Warrior-esque conversion there, and yeah, you just talk, James, and I'll keep talking. I'll be like being on live DJ. I'll be like, you're like the producer. Yeah, yeah. So what he's passed on there. There's a lot of like, you need to keep it briefer than that. I was sitting in silence for about 30 seconds there while you told me what you wanted to pass on. So cool use of bits, and then actually sort of the cohesiveness that's possible with that model of it sort of if you imagine sort of hundreds of them stomping over the top of a hill and charging into the enemy. And I think the scale's probably just about right for how I kind of imagine Thunder Warriors as well. I think having that sort of grotesque proportions kind of works for them because they weren't that sort of more refined Space Marine, although Space Marines are pretty grotesque, but they were at least sort of built relatively in a frame. Okay, and then the next two. So a really, really nice scratch built Malcador. That person, Gadget Girl, is clearly a very, very, very talented plastic card user. It doesn't even look like it's been built with that. It looks like it's sort of the real deal. So, um, assuming it's a she with the girl, but yeah, I think that looks fantastic. So there is quite a there's a lot of work in progress on her account. So yeah, definitely worth going and seeing the progress on that and the amount of detail. And then this one is the last one, the Lucius. I think that was actually it captures the moment of what Lucius did really well on Istvan 3, and I think he's probably one of the most absent, considering how important he was in the first 3 novels, well, two, second and third novel. I feel like he really deserved to get a model and a cool rule set and stuff. I know he didn't. He was an expert jeweler, but he wasn't really sort of like the praetor that led the second company type thing. But I feel like that is kind of is missing that they haven't done that. Um, Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think so. James just said there that it's kind of like you know exactly who that is and what he's just done, which is yeah, I agree with that. If you are on James, if you could put the links, if you get onto Twitch, if you manage to register, and just share them because that's one of the questions that's been asked. So that would be pretty cool. And then we'll move on. I guess it's just you're gonna have to keep listening to my dulcet tones. Yeah, and as Barnes put it, a Lucius model rather than a Sol controversial, but Kenshu, I think the original, the sort of generic, like the World Eater guy I've already forgotten the name of, they were all capable of being built with the generic bits. Salt Shavrindar, that's it. And same, yeah, in Morturg for the Death Guard as well. I think that's where they obviously did that so you could build them from what they had, but someone like Lucius didn't really deserve that because he was quite an intricately detailed. He was like a weirdo, so deserves it. So yeah, I think he should have had something. Okay, so that was meant to be a nice little chance for James to share stuff with you, but we're still having this issue, so we'll just have to play on. So I want to talk about the Siege of Terra series, which might be a chance for some of you to plug your ears, or worry about spoilers, or run for the hills. This is where Welshie would have been perfect, because he has got a right rant on about the way the Siege of Terra is going at the moment. He's not quite enjoying it in the same way that other people are, and his points are totally valid. I've really enjoyed them. I think they're good, and I've worked through the whole series as they've come out and the limited edition and all that, so I can make sure no one spoils it for me. And when he makes his points, you do actually look at it a bit and go, oh, and actually maybe he's got a point. So I would have loved him to have been on for this, but you're just going to have to put it with me. So the siege for me was always going to be a bit of a controversial topic, and it was always going to be a bit of a oddity. Hold on, I'm going to see. James, I'm going to turn off your camera, or you turn off your camera, and I won't have to do that, and then that'll be less weird seeing seeing you clatter away trying to share those links. Yeah, much better. Other than you not being James. Oh, no. So it was always going to be a bit of a controversial topic in terms of what make it right harsh and trying to move this thing along as if you don't know who I am. I don't think they will ever do it justice. I don't think they'll ever be able to make the headcanon that you have reality. And what I think happened at the Siege is not going to be what you think happened at the Siege, and they were never going to do that. They were never in a million years going to manage that. And I think it's unreasonable to think that just because you had it in your head a certain way, that it should have gone that way. But there are definitely flaws in the series now. I get the impression that they're quite keen to finish it as soon as they can, and that's why they're sort of they're not blitzing it, but they are flying through the story. Over the course of one book, the Traitor Titans managed to get to the wall, that sort of stuff. Like I think there is issues around the sort of the pacing of some of these books. And also, but you have to bear in mind that it was originally a few paragraphs, and it's become a million times bigger. And it's a shame that they haven't really. I think the majority of people probably do like it, which is a good thing. You always aim to please the majority. But I do think it's starting to creak a little bit. I think when you sort of lay down the traitor plan becomes incredibly wobbly when you actually analyse it, and I don't know if they've covered that well enough. I haven't read every single Heresy book. I know some of you probably have, like James has, but when the plan was we'll go to Earth, Terra, and we'll land and we'll take the palace, and I can't be alone. There must be every Heresy fan has gone, why don't they just blow up the palace from far away? And they added in the shield, but the shield's failing, so what they were doing was working. And that sort of logic has to go out the window for a story, because it'd be a crap story if the Vengeful Spirit and fleet turn up and just raise Terra to the ground, like blow up, because it's just going to be a crap story then, isn't it? And it would definitely not fit the sort of 40k. Oh no, Terra wasn't just attacked, it was blown up. But it kind of feels like they're leading to. They've said there's going to be a surprise along the way, and I've got three real theories. I think one of them is that Horus doesn't want to win, and I think that could become apparent not in the next book because that will focus mostly on the canon, but I wonder if Horus was designed by the Emperor not to, like, somehow there's going to be some nonsense there that's going to be that he doesn't want to actually do it. Or he somehow wins because somehow he wants to win over the Chaos Gods. Like, I think there's something there that, like, this is a spoiler for Mortis if you've not read it. And when he pulls Perturabo off the front lines, Perturabo's nearly won the thing single-handedly. He's made the decisions. The people on the ground have done the fighting. Perturabo's nearly won it, and Horus is like, right, you go to the front lines now. And Perturabo's like, what? I've got all these like keyboards here. I'm going to win this thing for you. And and Horus is like, no, you're getting redeployed. Get to the front line, sort of thing. I like that because it's a decision that shows that Horus maybe isn't feeling it. Like, he isn't. He's not thinking about the actual victory of the overall sort of the win for the traitors. He's thinking about his own personal victory at that stage. He doesn't care what happens to Perturabo. Perturabo's the tool that he's picked up, used, and thrown to the side. Perturabo's been played again, and that is quite an interesting sort of. I really like that in the book where Perturabo just gets his toys together, jumps on a ship, and sails off, and just gives up. And during that, I think it's in that book, the Emperor's children get a bit of a beaten, and they just bog off and start running about on Terra doing their thing. That's sort of the way that the layers are being peeled off. Actually, that's quite well written. I think that's quite a good way of progressing the story because the loyalists are so heavily outnumbered that if you had every single traitor legion still fighting in the actual streets in the palace, well, it'll be over in no time. So having a way of peeling them apart, I think, is actually quite good at stripping them down. But it does, yeah, I feel like they obviously know what the conclusion is and they're trying to get there, but not have it at the point where we know it's going to happen. But I think when they hint things like that, it's almost like they get to hand wave away some of the bad decisions that they've made along the way. So again, this is a slightly more recent spoiler. Fury of Magnus, cover your ears for the next minute. There's a moment in there where Magnus is given the opportunity to redeem himself, and he can join the Emperor again. The Emperor will forgive him, says it to his face. You can join back into the fold. And Magnus says, well, what about the Thousand Sons? And the Emperor's like, nope, they're too corrupt. We're not having them. We'll make new legionnaires for you. And Magnus thinks about it for the tiniest millisecond and then says, basically, up yours, I'm not doing it. It's, I guess, it kind of feels like are they trying to write the conclusion and we just see it really easily, or hopefully we see it really easily, or is there a little twist almost? And this is what I think will happen at the end of this, is that the Emperor's known this was the way it was always going to go, and the Emperor wanted this to happen. Because there's not really any reason for... So the Emperor could have said, yeah, cool, you can bring your Thousand Sons back into the fold. Magnus joins his side, we chase all the traitors away, and then he goes, actually, I've just found out these guys are so corrupt, we can't keep them, sorry. Like, that's probably going to be an easier fight to win than to turn the entire Thousand Sons against it, along with all the other traitors. But I don't think that would have worked as a... Magnus's poor story would have got a bit stretched there, so probably wouldn't have worked as well. But I think the biggest issue for me, I see some of these like inhibitor chips as a good suggestion, yeah. The Emperor was dead all along, possibly. The Lion turns out the right set. I think the Lion has still got a bit to play in this, but I'm not sure how he's going to get there with only a handful of books left. The bit that I am most worried about is that final conflict, where I've always really enjoyed the concept that it's a bog standard human being. I don't know how he gets. So this is the bit that why they've changed it. How does a normal guardsman end up on the Vengeful Spirit when it's the Imperial Fists and Custodes and Emperor that go? Doesn't really make sense. But hand wave that bit away for now. I always loved that bit of lore that it was basically just a guardsman who saw the Emperor was a bit messed up and charged him, and gave their life when Horus just evaporates them. And that's what makes the Emperor realise that Horus is too far gone, he's not salvageable. Emperor goes Super Saiyan and takes Horus out. That is surely the best. The whole concept is we're fighting for humanity here. We're not fighting for Space Marines, we're not fighting for Custodes or Primarchs. It's meant to be Horus versus the Emperor for humanity's sake. And that is where, to make it be Olanius Pius, a perpetual, completely undermines my enjoyment of that final. Like, this is a person, like, it's obviously going to be something along the lines of Ollie is a perpetual but gives his infinite life, to win the battle. And that's fine. That's a big sacrifice. Poor him. But the whole concept for me was meant to be it's humanity that's in the crucible, and that's what is decided. And I just don't I just don't think that that is a good enough climax to the story, because it just doesn't work. Like Finn has said there, regular humans are superior, humans better than Space Marines. In a very crude way, yes, because we are. I'm not in 41st millennia or 30th millennia. Humans were, and what it's all about. That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be this, like, there's absolute trillions and trillions of humans. There's only a few million Space Marines. It was never meant to be like the Horus Heresy was fought by Space Marines, but it's also fought by humans, and it's fought by Xenos as well. That doesn't do it for me as an ending if we have a perpetual or a Space Marine or whatever jumping in the way. Yeah, I'm waiting for James to type his theory. That'll be good. But I also have this sneaky suspicion that it's going to be. There's going to be like. There'll be a groan. I reckon there'll be a massive groan, because we'll all find out when the Emperor knew all along, or Horus is like, I tried to contain them for you, Dad, or whatever sort of nonsense twist that they want to put on the tail so that we didn't see it coming. I just think that could potentially really horribly affect the heresy. I don't like the idea that it's like, I just don't think it's going to work to have that as like the Emperor just goes, I made this happen. Doesn't work. But yeah, I think again, Finn, you're spot on. There was an era in the Black Library books, and it's sort of in the middle to final third, where it was like you were learning what the Primarchs liked to eat for their breakfast, and you were learning what shoe size they were, and I admire that, and I think obviously it sells books, but you can learn too much about them, and if you're not going to do something, again, biased, cover your ears if you don't like Space Wolf bias, if you're not going to do something like have a Primarch grow, like Lehman Russ, where he learns that the Emperor thinks of them as nothing but tools, but he goes and fights anyway, because that says something about his character, in good ways and bad ways. Doesn't mean, like, when I say it, I'm not saying it's just it's good because it means he's a brave guy. It means he's a fool. He's an idiot. He's going anyway. He could just turn around and say, you know what, Emperor, you've manipulated me. Piss off. I'm not doing your dirty work for you. But he goes anyway, and I think that is, even if you hate Space Wolves, you should like that concept that some of the Primarchs have, like Angron, just wanted to die. He didn't care. Just wanted to die with his gladiator pals on the planet. Didn't want to get involved in any of the Emperor's crap, and the Emperor made him. So can you blame Angron for hating the Emperor? No, didn't do anything for him. Like, didn't even take the butcher's nails out. Like, that sort of thing. Didn't. I'm on Angron's team all the way there. So I think that's where the sort of learning too much about the heresy can have a detrimental effect as well. Exactly as Finn's put it there. Like, we are. It almost feels like it should always have been the Primarchs were just on the horizon, and you were hearing about it all from the plebs. Even high-ranking plebs give me a Praetor. Sigismund's fine to learn about. I don't mind that. I think his story from the end of his story when Abaddon finally catches up with him. That's all fine, but the Primarchs, I don't know. And the Emperor definitely should not have spoken. I don't think that was a good use of that. But yeah, it's not for me. It wasn't brilliant. Yeah, that would be. I'd love that, Barton, if that was the sort of final. You spend your 50 quid in your book, and that's all. It's just a big black line all the way from start to finish, and then a pile of like smashed statue dust as the photos that are inside it. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that sort of urban legend thing. I do think that's a benefit. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's they have again. Finn, you'd be very good at a podcast. I would have invited you on, but I just can't seem to get anyone on anymore. But the sort of the crux of the story, they're fighting for our future. Space Marines decide the future of humanity, but they are not good guys. They are not, and I would even like again biased. I'm looking up at Space Wolf art next to me. Space Wolves are portrayed as being that sort of rebellious hero of the little people, like Salamanders are as well. But if they had to choose between like in 40k, finding Leman Russ or finding Vulcan, and that would mean they have to blow up a planet with a billion people on it. They're probably going to blow up the planet with a billion people on it. Like they're not that good. They just don't have the same ethics as we do. They don't have the same morals because they've been so psycho conditioned to behave in a different way. And that's what I feel like that's not come across very well in the Heresy. And the only way they did it was when Horus got wounded on Davin, and they basically stomped through the crowd and killed everyone. That's Space Marines being Space Marines. They didn't even think about it. Like the people were so desperate to see Horus, they didn't even notice they were getting turned to mush. But I think that's where the sort of they've tried to make them too human, but I'm sure there was a point in one of the books where Magnus can see what Primarchs are made of, and they're not really made of like flesh and bone. They're almost like you can almost see the warp inside them, and that sort of concept was what I liked about it. They aren't like you're not going to bump into Leman Russ in the shops and ask how he's doing. You're not going to find like Vulcan down at the pub having a few drinks. You're not like they shouldn't be like that. They should be the vast majority of the universe should consider like Jedi. Like there's a thing I saw in the last week or so that showed Moff Gideon when, and again spoilers if you haven't watched The Mandalorian, so mute me for a minute. There's a sort of the reaction of Moff Gideon when Luke comes in, and because for all intents and purposes, Jedi have been extinct for 50 years. No one, and even when they were active, the vast majority of people had never seen them. And that sort of mythology should have surrounded the higher ups in the Space Marine legions, I think, anyway. So that would have been better. But yeah, I think you guys are all on the same page there in the comments. I think that for the greater good is a very good way of putting it, given that the Tau are a little bit iffy themselves. And I think, yeah, again, Stephen, you get it spot on with the just humans aren't good guys. They're not. This is what always amazes me. I guess a tangent, but whatever. Got time. When you play a computer game and humans are always portrayed as in a real-time strategy game, are always portrayed as the sort of average of every single bit. Surely we would be the warmongers. Like, there's no way we would be the sort of the average, the average smart, average aggression, average like technology and all that stuff. Like, no way, we'd be the warmongers, and that's like it'd be like you should almost have a mode where if you're doing too well in a real-time strategy game, your own army turns against you because that's exactly what humans would do. So anyway, that's a bit of an aside, but it's I think that's like James has put there. They're so far removed from us that they might as well be aliens. Yeah, absolutely. Like it doesn't make sense any other way. Anyway, so sounds like you guys have got a spot on with how I think about it. So don't have to linger there. not got any more comments for me, so I will move on to the last bit. This is going to be quite a short show, I think, because I've done something to cock it up again. So the last thing we were going to kind of touch on was the sort of discussion on some of the cooler things we have in the hobby. And that wasn't just about the pictures that we were sharing there. It was meant to be on a sort of broader scale, some of the things that we've seen. And the first one that comes to mind for me is the Oz 30k stuff. I don't know if you go on Kickstarter or if you've seen the pictures from them. The not quite Thunder Warriors that they're doing at the moment. They're just amazing. I've backed those for printing at home, which is what most of this crap you can see behind me is involved in. I just think that it's an area that is really untapped for not just Games Workshop as a whole, but particularly for 30k, where we know that Forge World are not going to do certain models. They're not going to make a Remembrancer. And that's a real shame for me. I'd have loved to have seen a true Remembrancer model, or a retinue of these sorts of individual characters. Kind of like the Necromunda cult things they've been doing. Like the idea of having, I think they'll probably make Malkador. I guess he is kind of the king of Remembrancers, but the idea of having like here's a Remembrancer, here's two Adeptus Arbites sidekicks to protect them, and here's a data scribe guy. That is a little pack. I would buy, I'd buy 2 packs of that at least, because I love the NPC aspect of the hobby. I think that you don't always have to have stuff that has amazing rules in your army. You don't always have to have rules at all if the models are nice. But I just feel like that's what we're missing. Forge World aren't going to do that. And if someone in Australia wants to sculpt a really, really cool, not quite Thunder Warrior, like, fair play. I think that is brilliant to see the sort of the enthusiasm. It keeps the thing going. Like, how many times have you gone through one of these slumps and you find something like that and you think, oh, if I buy 2 packs of 5 of them and find an HQ, I've got a little mini allied militia force, even though Thunder Warriors don't exist in the Horus Heresy, but whatever, 10 of them can survive, I suppose. That sort of hope that it gives me that people are still being enthusiastic and pushing things and looking to bring out stuff that Forge World probably aren't. I think that's just where you can get quite a lot. And so just imagine like some of the no-hoper characters, like the guy from the Siege. It starts with a K. I'll never be able to pronounce it. Can't remember off the top of my head his name either. But that human that has just had it so shit. Like, how he's still alive, I don't know. Not Carol Cinderman, the guardsman, but Cinderman. He's a good example. And like the shit that guy's been through, he deserves a model just for the fact that he's comforted a dying blood angel. If nothing else, the guy deserves it for just being nice. Exactly what humans are supposed to be worth fighting over. I think he is a really cool guy. So someone like that, just have a model of that would be brilliant. And then they've also done their books as well. Andrew's done a brilliant job with them. I think that I've got them all here. I've not actually played anything with them, but it just kind of shows the passion that still exists in the hobby for Heresy stuff. And it also shows the sort of willingness that some people have. Like, they are produced brilliantly. Like, they're better produced than some of the Forge World books in terms of the lack of mistakes on certain pages, or the art and stuff that they've put together. They're up there. Not slagging Forge World particularly, but it just feels like that enthusiasm is so contagious. Like, when I got the Orc one, I was like, there's some nice Orc brute models that came out a wee while ago. Maybe I could bring a wee small force of them to an event and see if people would mind me using them. The Necron one's really well written, because you have to have a certain rank of Lord to unlock certain units, and that's like a real, as a narrative rules writer gamer, that's really cool, because you're thinking, oh well, if my little Necron Lord is only an underling, I think that could be really cool. I think that would be quite a like, okay, I can't touch a monolith because I don't deserve that because my guys aren't devout enough, if you want to call it that. But I can run loads and loads of little scabs or something like that. As as Gary's put it, the space elf. The Eldar book is very. They've tried to. They've basically what they've done is they've taken the old rules and the ones that people probably moaned about, and they've tried to make them more how people wanted them to be. So the Orc one, which I've read cover to cover, they added back in, which Orcs lost in the 7th edition Codex, I think, maybe 8th edition Codex, the ability to run an all bike list. So there was no reason to lose that. And I must need 7th edition actually. But at one point it could, and I had an all bloody bike Orc army, and I sold them because I thought, well, I'm not really playing this game very much. I'm more interested in Heresy. And then they removed the ability to do it. So I thought, well, what's the point of keeping them? And they've added it back in. And they're clearly guys that are, let's say, more engaged with the community. Not a critic. A company of Games Workshop size cannot listen to the whims of every single person. But I do feel like when you've got a small team of people who are just purely doing it for the passion, you can get a lot more done. And also you get away with more, which is probably where the little digs at Games Workshop aren't really justified. But I feel like they've done a brilliant job, and it's an absolute tragedy there won't be more published books, because having them in physical copies is really great. And then we've obviously got the Mournival events, which aren't the same people, which seems to be people get them all mixed up and treat them as the same, which is a bit unfair on the poor Mournival guys. I feel like there's good and bad with the Mournival stuff. I don't know if you guys have used any, or seen anyone using any, or heard anyone using any. It'd be interesting to hear. I feel like it brings some really, really interesting units for factions that have gaps. Again, Solar Auxilia is an army of mine, so I'm biased, but I feel like they have filled in some of the gaps that we have in those lists. Like Sentinels are. There's not really a reason not to have them, but then you could argue they're not really missing. But it adds something that gives the Solar Auxilia a bit of punch in a place where they didn't have that punch. Where I would say the Militia Rough Riders spot on. Where I would say that they're lacking, or where there's a mistake, is that they have tried to plug gaps that the Space Marine list has only on paper. So an example there, Gary's kind of hit the nail on the head, like this sort of answer is, so support breachers. I can see why they've done it, but I would argue they're not really necessary for, like, what do they add that isn't, unless you're playing like a full breacher company, having, which if you are, then I agree, you should, but if you're just playing, like if someone just chucked them in, that's all they had, they just had support breachers and 2 times 10 tactical squads. For me, that's like, I want to add this because they are better than something else that I could pick. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with the Space Marine adding in units. I think there's a risk that you can't playtest with 18 legions. So if you add in a unit because you think, right, the Imperial Fists need support breachers, or the Iron Warriors need support breachers because they are a siege army, and it makes sense. When you get to the Space Wolves, let's say, they can then potentially like run and charge with those shields. That's a crap example, but you see what I'm getting at. Like, essentially, you fill a gap that you think is there, and it's maybe not there for every legion. And I think that's a problem where you can end up in a situation where, because the book, I've got the book, have I got it to hand? Probably not. Let's see if this is it. Yeah. So, out of the contents, half of them are Space Marines, which is I would expect it to be 3/4 to be honest. Um, but they've put in stuff like um, the Independent Tech Marine, the Quartus Dreadnought Talon, um, Mars Spartan Speeder Squadron. Like they're filling gap. Mars Spartan Speeder Squadron makes sense because it's trying to use what exists as a model. The Heavy Destroyer Squad's what everyone's going to use because they are pretty good, and I think that's a problem. But that's what's held me back from accepting Warnerville events at the Heresy.Scot events. Is just because I think people will just go for that one thing that's really, really good. Not saying you're all filthy. don't start getting refunds, please. But I just think there's a risk there of because they're quite cool. They're a cool concept, but do you really want every single say there's 30 people at the next event? If 20 of them bring heavy destroyers, I don't know. I feel like there's maybe I need to play test it a bit and see which ones I think are fair game or not. But I really like the custom character section. If you haven't looked at that, have a look at that because it gives you relatively fair points totals for how to make your custom character from scratch. For example, if you wanted to make a custom Space Marine, there's boxes that have ticks that you tick next. So if I wanted a weapon skill 6 Space Marine, I have to tick 3 boxes because it costs 1 to make a weapon skill 5 and 2 to make a weapon skill 6. And then there's loads of options. So if he's a World Eater, he can have a chain axe for free, but if he wants one of the World Eater fancy weapons, that costs a tick. And the ticks, I think, are 5 points. I'm not going to keep you on. You read it up, whatever. So, well, it must be 1/5 because it's not 5 points worth to be weapon skill 5. But I really like that idea. I think that is where I'll be more inclined to let something like that go because it's one guy and it's a bad roll, like against a power fist and you're 4 up invul and you're dead anyway, so it's not likely to be someone is getting, I guess you can make yourself toughness 5, but that sort of custom character really appeals to me. So I think that would be interesting to hear what you think and whether that's something that we should consider for the events, but equally I'm open to suggestions on that. And then the last bit that we were going to show, well, that gives you a chance to type up your rants if you've got any rants against me. This was something that I saw, and James also confirmed he wanted it to be discussed. This guide, sorry, it's nothing to do with this, I can't take the credit. This guide is someone, there's a group, the Black Librarian team have written a guide on how to follow the Horus Heresy. And you won't be able to see it very well because this file is massive and actually crashed OBS to try and upload it to show you guys. But it follows it from left to right is the sort of timeline. If you're only interested in Prospero, I think that's there. Prospero, what books you read, and then it follows through. I think stuff like that's brilliant. I think people who are that inclined to take their time to document it would be brilliant to have more recognition. I think having a chat with them would be really interesting to see like what made you want to do that. Yeah, I think they did Barton. I think they did put something together. But I don't know if it was. I think Black Library did it. Definitely wasn't as detailed as this, but it was to try and get you to follow. You didn't have to read it book 1 to book 50 or however many there were. It sort of told you the order. This you can get a hold of it again. Hopefully, James might put it up in the chat if he's got time. But I'll put it up on. I'll have to put all the links on when I post if I dare post this video of me desperately trying to fix streams. When I post that up on YouTube, I try and put all the links in anyway. But this is definitely a brilliant way of catching up if you've missed something. You can see here on the right hand side the Siege of Terra as it is now progressing 1 book at a time. It's brilliant. Things like that are fantastic. Yeah, so James is just saying there, like the audiobooks and the short stories, where they tie in what order. So should you read a big book, short book, big book, or should you do short book, big book sort of thing? I think that is key in. Because I'm not going to read them all. I'm not going to pretend I'm going to read every story because I'm not that invested in some of the arcs that they had. But it might be interesting to see, like right bang in the middle is the Battle of Talar, and I think if I wanted just to read that section because I'm thinking about doing a Talar themed game, like at least then I know, okay, well, there's only 6 books by the look of it to read. That's much easier than googling Talarn and hoping that I find the right number of books. So, yeah, it's a brilliant way of doing it. He's done it there, good. So I'm done. That's early for us. I'm not usually finished by 9. If you guys have any comments other than please fix your streaming service or whatever, then all ears. You don't need to feed that back, but you can put other feedback in, things you'd like to hear on the show. Try and weave them in if we can. Hopefully, going to have Richard and Welshie back on the next one if they are about, and that will be well. I've done something. Whether I've broken it now, it'll never work again. You might get a notification of a test at some point during the week. You don't have to watch that because it'll just be me trying to make sure it's working. But yeah, sorry about the mix-ups again. That's just bad luck. We do go over to the Discord and have a bit of a chat. If you're not a member, then hopefully someone in the time I'm rambling can share an invite link. I might be fastest doing it though. So let's see if I can do it. Doesn't like it. But yeah, it'd be good to get people in. The Discord sort of goes through spells where it's quite busy, and it also goes through spells where it's quite. This link will expire in 7 days. There we go. Yes, either of those should work. It goes through spells where it's quite busy. Finn shared some really nice stuff he's been working on recently, and also it goes through quiet spells. I like that. Some people don't. I prefer not having to be like a. I know there's a couple of WhatsApp groups and there's a couple of Facebook chats. I don't really. I like to be able to scroll up and not have 3 billion messages. I like to be able to just sort of pick in and out. I'll try and post a lot more. I think I've gone through a bit of a hobby slump. That might be a topic that we should talk about in a future stream, unless you guys think that would be too grim. I think talking about how you cope with those slumps would be quite interesting as a because I tend to just sort of I don't do anything. Like I've not really been hobbying a huge amount. I am taking questions. I'll take questions now, or if you mean in a stream, I'd be happy to do a sort of a Q&A type thing. I think that could be a good chance to get to know people as well. Yeah, there's a good one. So Gary has said, do I think a 30 or 40k Total War game would work? I would bet probably my entire collection that within the next 5 years there'll be a Total War Warhammer. I don't know if it'll be 30k, but it'll be in the future section because I don't see why they wouldn't. I think Total War Warhammer has sold so well that it is inevitable. I don't think there's any other way of putting it. Because of the way that Total War works now, where you have like your amazing leader and support units, I can't see why they wouldn't have a Primarch with the squads around him. And with Anuj leaving Forge World to go and work for the company that makes Total War, I don't know. That is definitely Total War on the horizon for him. Like, there's no way they're not. Why would you hire someone who basically propped up the Horus Heresy, unless he just got so fucked off with it, he just decided that was the end for him. But it's too coincidental. I'd be very surprised if we don't get a Total War over 30,000. in the not too distant future. And most people would play it if there were 40k fans. I think we would probably be more inclined to play a 40k because you get the different factions then. I think if you did 30k it might be a bit boring because you'd end up with like the exact same armies charging each other. Whereas obviously with 40k you'd get like I played Total War Warhammer 1 and like the elements of that, the strategy of like building up your resources and stuff is more a 40k thing. So yeah, I think it'll happen. Whether it'll be good or not, I don't know, because a lot of the units will be shooty, but if you add in orcs, tyranids, then you can change it up a bit. But I don't know how complicated that would make Total War. Yeah, so I think that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, like I say, if you guys would, I don't I don't want to shy away from controversial topics. So things like how you get through your hobby slump do appeal to me in the discussion. I think the sort of hobby tips, it's a real shame that James didn't get to talk on the stream because that sort of element of, I think when you see what James has worked on in terms of his so I'm going to keep this up unless you really want to squint. Invite my nephew to the ScotCast, I don't think so. The sort of the smaller armies that James has done is quite an interesting topic. That was something that we had discussed before he was available. Like that sort of topic on, because isn't it right and wrong to collect and having a chat about sort of having whether you could have, how do you best start collecting is what you've said there, Barton, and I think that sort of how do you avoid making silly mistakes at the start of your buying so you don't end up with 50 unpainted bloody tanks or a Warlord Titan sitting unbuilt because you can't buy the bits because Forge World keeps selling it. That sort of conversation would be quite useful. So hopefully we'll get him on again and we can actually hear his voice. But what I'll probably do now, rather than you guys have to sit and listen to me talking shite, is we'll wrap it up now. That's been 2 hours. Be on the Discord. I'll definitely need to go and get a drink because my throat is hoarse from talking for 2 hours straight and from sweating all the sweat from breaking this bloody OBS. And then I'll be on there for a wee while. And it'll be good to see some of you on there. Come on the voice, and if I like the cut of your jib, who knows, maybe I'll be on one of these one day. You can also sit in silence while I click buttons and hope that people can talk. So I'll be on now, and thanks very much guys, really appreciate it. Sorry again about the cock-ups, wish I knew what the problem was, but I think it's probably me, and I'm not a very good technology person, so hopefully see you on very shortly, and we'll talk soon.